Hello, welcome to the Total Clarity Podcast. I'm Jessie Hyatt.
And I'm Mike Varley, and this is week 49 of our 52-week walk around New York City.
And this week, we were in the first week of our special walks, which are the final 4 walks of the entire project, where we touch multiple boroughs in each one.
That's right. And this week's walk centered around the movie 25th Hour by Spike Lee, with Ed Norton and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Barry Pepper, Anna Paquin, Rosario Dawson, Brian Cox, lots of stars in this one. And it is about or set in New York City. Mm-hmm. And as you will find with our interview this week, our first interview in 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, and our first interview ever actually in the room that we set up specifically for interviews.
That's right. We'll talk about that in a minute with our guest, James Morrison. James is an extremely talented filmmaker, editor, and it was a pleasure to get a chance to talk with him. He's also been super into film podcasts, so he made for a great guest.
Yeah, and I mean, we literally just recorded it and then, walked James out and onto the street and came back up here and are recording this. And it was great. I feel energized from the conversation. We had a nice flow. We really went in a bunch of different directions. So if you've seen the movie, I think dive right in. If you haven't seen it, be aware there's some spoilers. If you're up for that, that's fine. And if not, you've been warned here. Don't come after us.
That's right.
It's also a almost 20-year-old movie. So are spoilers a thing? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. So we based our route this week on the scenes that are called out in one particular aspect of the film. We will talk about that in a minute with James. And we hope you enjoy this talk about 25th Hour.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking this room kind of reminds me of, speaking of movie stuff, it's a little bit like the Twin Peaks room.
Oh, yeah.
Except instead of red, we're in, it's kind of beigey gold.
Yeah, yeah.
And my wife tells me I'm colorblind. So you guys could be like, these are green. And I'd be like,
no, it's gold.
Okay.
It's gold, yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
that favorite gum you like is coming back in style.
Whoa. I start speaking backwards.
But yeah,
birds are singing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for you are the first guest in this room.
Yeah.
So, and our first post-pandemic, well, we're still very much in the pandemic, let's be clear.
But post-vaccinated
That's right.
for the people in this room.
We 3 vaccinated.
Yes.
Gathered here
good.
today.
It feels really good to be sitting with people. I've had major Zoom burnout.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even, my wife would be like, what are you talking about? She's the one Zooming. But watching her Zoom for meetings makes me burnt out on Zoom and all interactions online.
Yeah.
I just don't ever want to,
I'm never on it, but the 3 times I've had to do work on Zoom this whole year, is enough to burn me out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to be in person.
I always feel like it's draining, and I never feel like, if, hanging out with people in person is it can be draining, but hopefully this won't be draining. But I feel like hanging out in person is I always feel good, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes even talking on the phone can be a little bit when you get off, you're I don't know. So yeah, it's really cool to be in person with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So. And this is our 3rd movie podcast episode, our 3rd and final.
Oh,
we did one out in Queens. We're Queens movie locations. Mm-hmm. We covered Goodfellas and Coming to America and Men in Black.
Oh,
nice. So that was cool. And then we did, where was the second
The
movie?
Royal Tenenbaums.
That's right. We did a locations for the Royal Tenenbaums. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
then this one.
This is the one I would have wanted to do. I'm glad that you guys asked me for this one.
Perfect. We must have known. Yeah. Something was in the air.
Yeah. So we're doing the Spike Lee's movie 25th Hour, and the route itself is based on one small section of the film. But we'll talk about the whole film because it's a great film to talk about. And that is the fuck you scene from the Spike Lee movie, which, I don't know, would you call that a montage? I don't know if the language escapes me for what exactly that is.
I mean, we've been calling it a monologue.
It's definitely
a monologue. But yeah, I guess the clips of, it's not showing a progression, but it is clips.
Yeah, it feels montagey to me just because it's jumping around a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's the one. It's a part of that movie that everyone remembers now. And it's almost. I was thinking about it when I was rewatching it. It's almost 20 years old.
Yeah.
That's a weird feeling, right? When you're like, getting to a point where you're like, I mean, because I remember seeing this in the theater, and so it's really, weird for me to do the math and be like, because things don't feel that long ago to me. That feels like 5 years ago.
Right.
And even when I was rewatching it, I was like, oh my God, Edward Norton looks so young. And I was also like, what happened to Edward Norton? Where's Edward Norton? Where's he been? I know he pops up in...
yeah, where has he been?
He's popped up in Wes Anderson's movies.
Okay, cool.
In those little bits and pieces. And I know I did get to listen to that interview. And...
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting nuggets from that interview, but go on, yeah.
Yeah, I listened to the interview with him and Spike Lee, and he talks in that interview, which was like 2003, about how he's adapting Motherless Brooklyn.
Right.
Which came out like 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2019.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
wow. So he's been working on that for a long time.
Yeah. So this is a Charile Rose interview we're referring to. We'll add it in the description to the video for those watching. And yeah, I mean, it's such a sharp contrast. And I mean, you'll know this as well as anybody, the idea of like development and like how long it potentially takes. That the 25th Hour movie developed in, I mean, a year, less than a year,
25
basically.
hours.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the movie was shot in 6 weeks, but even getting to the start point was a matter of months, which is pretty unheard of. And then yeah, I mean, Edward Norton in the interview references, I'm going to start writing this passion project of mine called Motherless Brooklyn in 2003. Spike Lee was like, "Oh, that sounds good," And then 16 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
But
it's I mean, it's actually kind of impressive that someone can have 16 years worth of drive to get something done.
Yeah.
In them too. Like, I would give up. I would not. I would be like, by year 3, I'd be like, okay, it's not going to happen.
I don't know. I mean, do you have any in your head? Do you have things that you've had for a while that you're like, one day?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually find it really inspiring when I hear like things taking forever. Because then I'm like, it's kind of like other people who are famous all of a sudden seem human.
Yeah.
And like you're like, yeah, it's just hard to get anything done. Especially a movie when you have to get people together and money, and then So I actually kind of am always inspired. Like I'm glad when the movies happen. I want the movies to get made, but it's like when somebody talks about their hardships. I think anybody who's a filmmaker, or maybe struggling filmmakers, and maybe all filmmakers are struggling filmmakers, but when you hear about like Orson Wells and all these like people having problems, or it's just like instantly for me you feel. You're like, well, maybe I'm doing something right, because I'm also having a hard time getting stuff made. But yeah, I think almost everything, even the things that I have gotten to make, like they took so much longer than I ever would have thought they would have. Even if you were like, I have a movie, it's all one shot, it's just a dog, he walks on the street, it takes like a year.
Right.
You're like, whose dog? What street? You can't film on that street. I don't have a camera. You know what I mean? There's just like so many things that make it hard.
Yeah.
But,
There's a great Orson Wells story that I'm going to butcher, where he talks about Winston Churchill helping him get a project funded by like a Russian oligarch. Like, and again, I'll butcher it, but you should check it out. Where like he was whining and dining some financier, and I guess he had done some sort of benefit back in the World War II days, and had met Winston Churchill like on a dais, like very passing, and then Churchill had come up to their table and just like did some small talk or something, and then went away, and the financier was like blown away.
Yeah.
And they were like, I think they were like in Greece or something. I'm going to just continually butcher this even further, but they were like in a vacation area somewhere. And so the next day, Wells saw Churchill like out swimming and was like, hey, I really got to thank you. You helped get this, picture. Like, you really goosed this guy here. Mm-hmm. And Churchill was like, oh, okay. And then they saw each other another time. Again, the financier, Orson Welles, and Churchill sees him. And when he sees him, he comes over and then salutes Wells. And then like walks away. And that was like just to like really like seal the deal for the situation.
Wow.
So yeah.
Awesome.
That's probably
wild.
about 80% of what actually happened. But I mean, also Orson Welles has such an amazing command of language as well. Just to hear him tell stories is incredible. So.
Oh yeah, totally.
But yeah, so you watched that interview. I mean, there
Yeah.
was a bunch of nuggets in there that were really I was excited to talk about. I don't think I told
I
you
didn't.
this.
Oh yeah, and I
Yeah.
didn't watch the interview, but you
Yeah.
told me a couple of it. Yeah.
But this fuck New York section of the movie, which we can also include in the description, so people can, if they just want to watch that. But
Yeah.
you should probably watch the entire movie too, because it's very good.
It's a great movie. It's a great movie.
But that section, talk about development, was initially developed out. It was in the book that was written.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Spike Lee read the book after getting the script.
Yeah.
And was like, why? Contacted the author, who David Benioff of Game of Thrones. He was like, why is this got taken out? And he was like, oh, because it was said that it shouldn't be in there.
Oh.
And Spike Lee was like, no, we're
That
putting
needs to
that
be in there.
back in.
Spike Lee was like, I need more fuck yous in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that why they took it out? Because they were like, it's too cursing? There's too much cursing?
I mean, it's pretty like. It could also just be that like it's kind of like abrasive, you know.
Oh,
what I mean?
totally. Well, I
guess it's
got,
incredibly
like, this
abrasive.
Very sort of like. I was kind of actually struck by it all these years later watching it now.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, this is like kind of playing with fire for
Totally.
sure. in a
Yeah.
way.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Recommending to people to only watch that part of it, I actually think is a really bad idea because it's like so not okay. Like that, like it's the least like
In contemporary times,
PC
particularly. Yeah.
okay part of the movie. And like I feel like without having the full character development to like understand what he's talking about and like why he's referencing all of this, like I don't know.
I agree that watching it like out of context right now, if you didn't see that movie, you might be like, "Oh, fuck this scene," you know?
Yeah.
And I think that not to jump ahead too far into the movie, but I'd forgotten how the movie where it goes to in the end, which really made me feel like it's that thing that happens where, you know, if you only read the piece of a book or see the part of the movie and you don't get the whole thing, you suddenly feel like, oh, they weren't just doing it to be, you know, aggressive.
You're right.
There's just the way it kind of comes back a little bit, which we can talk about when we get to the end if you guys want.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
I think that reframed it, even 20 years later, however many years later it's been, I was sort of like, oh, he knows what he's doing. He's Spike Lee. Like, he's not, you know.
Well, and that
Right.
reframing is interesting because according to the interview, was an Ed Norton
idea.
contribution.
Yeah.
But you know, Norton also, I think it was a great merging of several things. It was Spike Lee's skill and background as a director, merging with Norton's cinematic background from American History X as, you know, an ex-skinhead, and then like taking the two of those things and also like the way that it's filmed, where it's the mirror talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little indirectly not him, you know?
Yeah.
And I think where it like really, like when he starts like saying like, you know, fuck Jesus too, you know, like he got off easy, 3 days in hell, and then all the angels praising his name for the rest of his, like that's when it's like, it goes to this other gear, and then he starts blaming all of his family members. Like it's, you know, it's not just, and I guess we're talking around it, it's like he is taking every individual neighborhood, and not every, but like lots of different neighborhoods like Bensonhurst, Harlem, Upper East Side, and like all the worst
people.
versions of stereotypes that live there, and just saying fuck you, and then to like take it like to the absurd of like fuck Osama bin Laden, fuck Jesus, fuck all my friends, fuck this entire city, you know, and then ultimately Monty Brogan, Edward Norton's character, you know, telling the mirror, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
You threw it all away, you know.
And again, like if you watched it just by itself, I mean, it's just backing up and being like, it's a movie about a guy who's kind of doomed himself and is about to go to prison.
Right.
It totally makes sense that he'd say that to everybody and feel that because he's saying it to himself, you know, and it's like, I think the more I think about it, the more I appreciate it. I was sort of shocked by it this time, like 20 years later. I was a little bit like, because I remember when it came out, that scene. I know that scene's, I don't know if iconic is the right word, but it's something that people still remember. And
Sure.
It's funny. I mean, this is a total tangent, but it reminds me, now that we're talking about it, of one of my favorite movies of all time, Synecdoche, New York.
Oh, sure.
Has a scene where they have like a preacher at a funeral. He's like, anyway, I'm not going to set it up well because that movie's like so many things within things. But do you know the scene where he's like, Diane Wiest takes over as the director?
Yeah.
And then she like whispers something into this guy's ear, and he's going to give like a speech at a funeral. And the actor who's playing this priest starts giving this sort of like eulogy or this thing about just like, sometimes you don't know like where your life's going, and so, and who even cares where my life is going. And I'm paraphrasing it terribly, but the end I know, and it's very much like this movie. But he's like, maybe no one cares about my sadness. Well, you know what? Fuck everyone. Like, then it starts raining, and and in a weird way, it's like I feel like the 25th hour in this scene that we're talking about it does get to that sort of big, absurd level toward the end. Right? Where you're just sort of like, this guy hates himself so much in this moment. He hates everyone around him. And so, yeah, it's an abrasive scene, but I think it's also true to like what he's going through as a person. And I think, it's a complicated part of the movie that I think like people might now really not want to do or would throw out or be, only maybe see the abrasiveness, but
right. But I think this is the first time I saw it, actually. I had never seen it when it had first come out. And then when we knew it was planned, I waited until this week to watch it. And I was definitely like shocked and like uncomfortable. But I do think that him at the end being like, no, fuck you, and like to himself, and the fact that it was just like, it felt like character development. It didn't feel like we're saying that these stereotypes are accurate. Right. It felt like character development, and it also felt like 2002. Like, especially, when he calls out, fuck Osama bin Laden. Like, nobody's talking about Osama bin Laden anymore. But, like, in this movie, there's all these references to September 11th, and you've already seen them a couple times, so you know, like, what place and time you're in.
Yeah.
And I feel like, even watching it now, I'm like, okay, this isn't, like, a contemporary movie. I'm not watching something that was made yesterday. I'm watching something that was made in 2002, and this is like this character in 2002.
Yeah.
Totally.
Which is a fairly decent segue to talking about your first experience of the film. You kind of gave a little bit of a taste, but I didn't want to know until...
Well, when you emailed me about it, so I saw this movie in theaters.
Yeah.
And I remember it vividly because best friend from all time growing up, Nathan Marquise, he and I were both in high school. He's like a year older than me, so he might have been a junior, I might have been a sophomore or somewhere in there. So I might have like had to sneak into this movie because I think it's an R.
Yeah.
But we saw everything. Like we would go to the movie theater like every week, every other week, and we both thought Edward Norton was like the greatest like person on earth around this time, like 2002, like young like Catholic high kids, like Catholic high school kids. Like we thought he was like I don't even know if we thought he was like De Niro. I think we thought he was really unique. And my friend Nathan is an actor, and I already knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and he had such a good string of movies going into this, like and this felt sort of like he's like top billed, like kind of movie star thing, where it's like it's almost strange to think now about like if Edward Norton would carry or sell a movie the way that he, now that he did then, where then it was like, this would be like, I don't want to compare him to like DiCaprio or somebody, but I feel like he was big. He was really big.
He was a big deal.
Well, Fight Club had already come out, right?
Fight Club had come out, which was like, such an iconic and big movie, and everyone, especially if you were like a young guy, you were like, and I've listened to a couple things recently about Fight Club and how like, people thinking it hasn't aged well, but then people arguing that people are misreading it, that it's a satire, and that's a whole other thing. But I think Edward Norton's great in that movie. And anyway, I just remember we went to this movie theater, like I feel like it was opening night, and we just felt like we were so cool. We were like seeing a Spike Lee movie. I'd probably seen like a couple Spike Lee movies before this. Like we knew like he was like up there with like the greats.
Right.
And I just remember the movie starting and the opening titles with the lights from September 11th.
Right. Which we were just talking about.
Yeah. Go on, but could you tell your...
So I just remember being like, it was just so, it had just happened.
Yeah.
And it felt so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just to see that being presented in a movie so quickly.
Yeah.
And just to sort of fast forward, my friend Nathan, I don't remember it super well. I probably like 16, 15 years old, but I remember my friend Nathan crying in this movie and being unbelievably moved by it.
Yeah.
And to this day, I think he still talks about it. Like it's a really important movie for him. And I almost remember his reaction to it more than the movie.
Oh, interesting.
You know, and so like when you guys told me you were doing this, I was like, I can't wait to rewatch this because I hadn't seen it since 2002.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like at that time, I was like, I think I loved it, but I mostly remember just being moved by how much my friend connected to this movie. And I remember Norton being a big deal to me then. And so, yeah, so I think I'm getting all the things in this story I wanted to tell you.
And you had not moved to New York at that point.
I had moved to New York, and I never thought, New York wasn't even on my radar of places I wanted to go. I was always like, Los Angeles, Hollywood. You know, I thought that like you just went out there and it was like they were making movies everywhere and people were really cool or something.
Were you in Texas at that point?
No, I was in Little Rock.
Oh, okay.
I have family in Texas. I have family all over, but
Okay.
I grew up in Little Rock mostly. And so, yeah, it was just like...
So, New York was like not... You weren't
it was just something that I didn't associate like movie making with.
Gotcha.
I associated New York with like just a big city and like, you know, commerce and sort of just like the hustle bustle, but I didn't think of it as a filmmaking city.
Yeah.
And I think I was really wrong. It took me coming here to realize that I had it messed up in my head. I think I thought I wanted to go to Los Angeles, and when I went there, I was sort of like, whoa, wait a second, this isn't what I was looking for.
Not great. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just love that memory of my friend crying in this movie, and he still talks about how like I think he's probably seen it since, and he finds it to be just really important movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch on that at some point, but because I think I might have an idea why, even though I don't know your friend.
No,
but I want to go back to the intro with the September 11th lights because I hadn't even really put it together. I mean, it's super powerful, but Jesse, you know, brought up the idea that, or we started talking about it together, the idea of New York as a credit roll intro thing, or just like the idea of flyovers of cities, but New York in particular, that's like a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of when I think of the 80s, I think like almost every movie shot in New York is like, we'll start by flying over the city.
Yeah.
You know,
Look at these buildings.
Set the place.
It's always this skyline shot. And I said to Mike yesterday, I was like, you know, I wonder if this movie is the only movie that captures that particular skyline. Because that skyline itself was only 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And that, you know, without any tower there at all.
Yeah.
But specifically that skyline without the towers and with the lights, like, and I don't remember completely, but I think they had the lights going for a year after September 11th, and now they just do it for the month of September.
Right.
But yeah, like I've seen movies since the new One World Trade Center has been built, and they show that skyline.
Right.
And obviously, we've all seen movies pre-2001 where you see the Twin Towers, but like that specific skyline, like this might be the only movie that captures that.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. Like that's a like very specific moment in time that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just the new tower now. It's just like looking at the skyline in general. I was like, oh my God, it's so much more crowded now. Just in we're saying 20 years, but it's really more like what 19? Is it 20 years this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it came out. I think it came out like the first month of 2003, something like that. It was they were talking about it being like Oscar season 2003 or something. So it was filmed in 2002. So yeah, I mean, we're getting there.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I thought it was really cool, and I don't know if like there in the making of the film like that there was any accounting to do the intro that way. It's like kind of a callback or just like a reference to that being such like a cinematic trope, you know.
Yeah.
But also how powerful it is at that time to like see what that is or not. But yeah, it was a great start to the film.
Do you remember the first time you saw it? Like, did you see it for the first time for this?
I honestly no. Okay. I had it on DVD for a while. It turns out I didn't have it on DVD. I must have got lost at some point. But we watched it on streaming. But no, I can't recall. I would expect it was on DVD and not on in theaters, but I don't know for certain. All I just know that I've always, since the first time I saw it, it resonated with me as a very good film for me.
But you would have been like a teenager.
We were the same age. Yeah, I mean, I I mean, in 2002, I would have been a freshman in college, I think, or depending, so I would have been a freshman in college probably.
I just bring that up because on this revisit, I did find myself thinking like, oh, this is a very young man's movie. Like very much, and to ways where I feel like I have some problems with this movie years later, not for any of the things we've talked about yet, but the energy of it feels very like what a young guy who likes like acting and like like it feels very much like that. It has that energy in a way that's kind of, you know.
And I think that was kind of where I wanted to go with your friend, resonating with your friend a lot. So I was trying to figure out how to frame this in the way that makes the most sense. But basically, we could start by saying, you know, most films, the history of cinema, pretty much to this point, with the exception of maybe the past half dozen years, you know, the default filmic perspective is the male perspective, right? You know, it doesn't really matter if it's romance or action or whatever. Like everything is kind of coming from like the default is the male perspective.
Right.
That said, this particular film, I think, is more of like a man emotional film than a lot of films typically are, which is to say that it's men talking about emotional issues / this is how men interact around the topic of emotions, I guess, you know. And I think perhaps that is why it resonated with your friend, because that's not necessarily something we see a lot of anyway. Even though most films are from the male perspective, it like the emotions are generally sliced out of it in order to like advance the plot, you know.
Sure.
And so it was cool. I mean, also like there are. I'd probably go back and count the minutes, and it'd probably be less than 5 when there's more than 2 characters interacting on screen. You know, the film constantly is creating situations where somebody's going to the bathroom or somebody's doing something else in order to have these smaller conversations, which allows for, I guess, more of that male emotional energy to go back and forth with. And I mean, it does have some. Well, what are some of the issues that you know in 20 years later? What are some of the things that you're seeing? Maybe issues isn't the right word, but you know, like what are you seeing here that's like this is not where I was 20 years ago?
Okay, so I watched this movie in 2 chunks, which I normally don't like to do. I normally would want to see it, you know, like ideally, like if you're playing at film form or something, you'd see the whole thing,
right?
You know. But I had to break it up into like I watched the first hour on like, you know, Monday and the second hour on Tuesday. And I really struggled with the first hour of this movie. I struggled with it to the point where I was like, I'm gonna have to call you and be like, I don't know if you want to talk to me about this. Like, I'm really like,
Juicy.
I'm really wrestling with like, as a piece of filmmaking, like I'm just despising this movie.
Oh, why?
But well. To answer why, I felt like, you know how like sometimes somebody's doing like a card trick and it's like it's not that you know how they're doing it, but they're just like pouring on so much like sauce to their showmanship that you're like, I don't even care anymore. Just like leave me alone. I felt like that this movie, the way that it
with the editing.
It's the music mostly.
The music, okay.
The music, like I love and this is tricky because like I love like the main theme that plays.
Yeah.
I think it has this very kind of like old-fashioned score in a way, but there's so much music on this movie when I feel like I have no idea why. I actually the thing that I think kind of rubs me wrong about it is I think them trying to bring up 9/11 the way that they do feels very sort of just like this happened, and I feel like there's just this kind of, it just feels sort of like shoot in.
Interesting.
To me.
That's so interesting because we actually talked about that too, and like I feel the opposite, where I feel like this is showing that it was made a year later, where like everyone in New York probably that year had been like telling their story and talking about it a lot and being very emotional about it and like having long conversations. And it's like almost the equivalent, this is something Mike said to me, but almost the equivalent of like where we're at with the pandemic right now, where it's like, if we want to specifically talk about the pandemic, we can, but we can also be like, oh yeah, the pandemic, it's really fucked people up, huh? moving on.
Yeah.
You know, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
how I felt like they were referencing 9/11, where it was like, it happened, it happened, it happened. We all know it's all like a
Yeah.
very part of the landscape right now.
Yeah.
But we're also like, they're all New Yorkers that have just like been
Yeah.
living fully in it.
Yeah, I
for
think it's
that
a
year.
really interesting comparison to the pandemic in that like it's this sort of it's hard to like get clear of it and not be affected by and not sort of like have it cast this long shadow over the next. It's going to cast a shadow for however many years, maybe
It will,
forever.
yeah.
But I think that like the problem I had with it in this movie was I wanted it to continue to be threaded through it a little bit more.
Oh.
And, you know, not to be like nitpicky, but oh my gosh, there's the scene with the great Philip Seymour Hoffman, like one of my favorite actors of all time.
Yeah.
And it's Barry Pepper when he's in his condo or apartment
Okay.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And it looks out at and it's like the music is so much that I feel like it's the card trick thing where it's just like I feel like I'm like Spike Lee, you've made some of the greatest movies of all time. Like you're so great. And he's not, maybe Spike Lee is like not known for being like a subtle filmmaker. I'm not saying I needed to be subtle. It's just that like, but that in that moment, like it's like the tricks that he's using for me, like take me out of the movie in a way that I was just like, I almost felt like cringy. Like I just was like, I can't, but it's not just that moment. Like there's a lot of other moments throughout the first hour of this movie. Now, jumping ahead a little bit, I will say, and maybe like, I don't know, maybe I was just having a bad night. The second hour of this movie, I was like in tears. I was like, oh my God, he's like, like everything about this. So it was like that weird experience where I did really come to love the movie by the end, and I love where the movie gets.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie in the second half kind of drops. It doesn't really bring up the 9/11 stuff again.
Yeah.
I don't think.
When he's in his dad, like during that "fuck you" scene
in the bar,
they reference it real quick.
I think that's the first half of the day.
Oh, is that still the first half?
First half of the
maybe?
movie,
probably
yeah.
it's probably about
It does.
yeah.
I mean, I don't think that the
can't
book was
remember.
specifically written about 9/11. So I think Spike Lee was just interested in. I could be wrong. I haven't read the book.
Yeah.
I like that they try it. It's just that the way he tries it with like that, you know, with that music and stuff, I'm just like, oof, like.
It's funny. I don't remember the
Yeah.
music from that scene. What I did remember, and I asked you if the editing was, because I found the beginning editing to be an interesting choice because I think what I interpreted the first 10 minutes of the editing where they like show the same shots again.
Like from different angles. Kind of.
And
I did not like that at all, by the way.
Well, I thought maybe either they had the scene and they were like, we're in trouble. This isn't a great scene. We need to do something to like up the pace.
Right.
Or they thought, well, this movie is mostly dialogue between sets of two people.
Right.
We need to make the beginning feel faster so that people will engage it and not just like turn it off or walk away.
Right.
So that particular scene with the ruins of one of the World Trade Center in the background has no cut. I don't know if you like. It's just a one shot the whole time, and I don't know if I would have noticed it had it not been like such hyper editing at the beginning. But it did strike me that it was like that way, and it was just like letting the two actors go. But I didn't remember the music at all from that scene.
And I know that's like a weird nitpicky thing to bring up. It happens a lot though. Like there's like the scene where you meet Philip Seymour Hoffman in the classroom. The music goes on forever.
Does it?
It goes on. It's like a really long scene, and the music just like keeps going to the point where I was like, I just felt like I felt like I was like the movie just had all these tricks. Like it really wanted to sort of like lay it on thick. And
I love that you're bringing it up. Like I love that you're saying the stuff that you see that's negative in it, because I also think that speaks to like, you know, what goes into movie magic. I don't. So I feel like I got tricked.
But I
was probably like, oh, like hearing the music but not noticing it, and like I'm like the basic bitch that's like,
no,
I'm fooled.
I don't think that's I think if it works, it's good magic. I think it's just like it did feel kind of more dated to me in that way. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I can watch a movie from like, you know, the 30s, and it actually doesn't feel dated because I feel like its sort of approach feels more or less like it lulls me in somehow. And sometimes it's like, you know, it's like when somebody's trying so many things, and I'm like, I don't want you to try all these things right now. Like, you have Philip Seymour Hoffman, like teaching a class. Like, you got it. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, but again, that, you know, that's me being really like nitpicky. I did feel like, I don't know, did it feel dated at all? Like aside from like the 9/11 stuff, and aside from like did it feel dated to you guys? And that like, I do feel like this is the type of movie that like doesn't get maybe, they get made now, but like they don't get released in theaters, and you don't have like these big, top actors, like top billed, like like all in one movie. I feel like in a drama like this, like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, did it stand out to you guys as feeling older?
I mean, I think that the subject matter of like Philip Seymour Hoffman's relationship with the student was like something that would probably be navigated differently than it would. We talked a lot about that.
We did.
I would say, so like, we should talk about that one first.
Yeah.
And also, like, I guess we're a half hour in. Should probably describe the basic plot of this movie.
Yes,
for
yeah.
anybody.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah.
If you're
for
a half
anyone that's-
hour, congratulations that you've waited this long to not know what the hell we're talking about. Ed Norton is a ex-drug dealer, and I say ex because he was caught with some heroin in his couch, and 25th Hour is a reference to the idea that this is his last day before he has to go to prison.
Yeah.
So he's going to celebrate it with his friends and his girlfriend, and he's also unclear as to who tipped off the DEA on where the drugs were, and so he has anxieties about that. Could it be his girlfriend?
Yeah.
And so he's going to hang out with his two best male friends, which is Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's a teacher. He has a thing for one of his students, obviously inappropriate, and Barry Pepper, who's a Wall Street guy. I think they introduced his scene pretty well. It was like a great example of like, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how trading works, just enough that like you don't need to understand. And like I thought it was fleshed out well. Brian Cox is also in the movie as Ed Norton's dad. He does a great job. And yeah, it's basically taking us through that day with some occasional flashbacks and some like interesting montages throughout the film. And so yeah, the Philip Seymour Hoffman storyline was definitely an interesting one, and we went back and forth on would it be made today / was it handled well, And I would say, I guess we're going to have to just spoil the film. There's no way you can,
spoiler alert,
stop
whatever,
it here
spoiler
if you
alert.
haven't, but as I describe all the things and then tell you to watch it. But Philip Seymour Hoffman's character ends up, kissing this student, Anna Paquin, and
but after like so much, it's like, I mean, I feel like the whole way that they handled it, I don't know. I kept comparing it to American Beauty in so many ways because that movie was horrifying to me. I like do not like that movie.
Well, that's dated for multiple reasons.
At all.
So.
Well, yeah, Kevin Spacey is also bye-bye. But like, no, that movie was just hard for me to watch, like in general. But I did think that the comparison that I have for that is that in both of them, it's sort of this like awkward older man that isn't really sure how to handle it. And then this younger girl that's like kind of coming on to them, but like doesn't really want the whole, like they just want some sort of like validation. So I do think it's an interesting concept, and it's like definitely a real experience. Like I think probably everyone has either like been in that situation in high school at some point, or has seen a classmate like flirting with their teacher, or like, has like experienced some sort of thing like that you can relate to.
Yeah.
Probably not as many people have been in Philip Seymour Hoffman's position, but yeah, I think the way they show him being like so uncomfortable and like trying to get out of it and trying to like look away and like push it all down. And then like it all builds up to this final thing where it's like he's so close to like not screwing this up. And then like what does he do? Like he follows her up the stairs and kisses her? Like it's so crazy. But I do think the way they told the whole storyline, like it gives you this whole picture of like who he is, and he's trying so hard to like do his best, and he's talking to his friend about it. And then she's really like all over him. But I like that they also show her sort of like not like, oh, this wasn't what I wanted to do. Like, I think it really tells the whole picture really well.
I was shocked by when it reaches its end, how much I feel like I appreciated it, if that's the right word. Of all the threads of this movie, and I think I'm just really biased because of Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah.
And I think also it's just different when somebody's gone and you're watching them, and it's
Yeah.
like, but I mean, any time, like the moment he showed up in this movie, even with the music driving me crazy, I was like, I would watch this guy literally do anything. And it's like, not whatever he's doing feels so, I don't know if like cinematic might be like an overused word, but like he makes anything feel like it should be in the movie. And I feel like he also makes me, he's like one of these actors who he's so like, you feel like you've been him at some point. He has like, I don't know how he did it or what he did when he was working that made it. But like for me, it's like, I'm just really biased. I think he's like one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gosh, like I couldn't remember how that part of the movie went. And I think it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. And
Totally,
yeah.
he totally does screw up. But I feel like the humanity at the end of that moment of like, it doesn't, turn into this, like, it doesn't go to the next level.
Right.
She doesn't grab him and start like, then I felt like that, to me, that moment of like, oh God, this was a mistake when they kiss.
Yeah.
Without any dialogue was so like, just like two great actors working on doing a scene that's like uncomfortable to watch. And I think now it's like really quick for people to be like, that's bad in reality, so therefore we shouldn't make movies about it. And I'm like, maybe, but it's like, to me, it's like the way that they portrayed it was incredible, I thought. And I think it's just a tribute to their performances. It did make me think, I couldn't help but think about, have you guys seen, sorry.
Yeah, I interrupted you completely. I think that's actually one of the most memorable music parts of that movie. When they have, I love that song and I can't recall the name, but when they have it like the breakdown of the song happening as he's going up the stairs and then after the kiss, that conveyor, which they used to great effect several times in the warehouse scene. I really enjoyed that part of the sound.
I feel like that's also an example where I feel like all of Spike Lee's tricks and his like sort of boldness is working really well for me. Like when he's doing it in the club, I'm like, I like don't notice it. I'm just like in the movie.
Right.
It's just like in the sort of first half of the movie where I felt like with those sort of like double thing of like showing the same thing and like the music and sort of just, and also some of the bigness of like the masculinity of like Barry Pepper with his ball and Edward Norton being like, I can do, like there was something where I was like, guys, like calm down.
Right.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman's like the opposite of that.
Right.
It's just like his energy is so, like, I just believe everything he does. I just believe him. Even when it's like over the top, it's still so believable. I think Anna Paquin's really good.
Oh,
Did
so
you guys
good,
see Margaret ever? Because it's a really strange movie. You guys, it's such an incredible New York movie.
Oh, yeah.
Kenneth Lonergan, who I was not familiar with him until my friend Josh introduced me to his work. He made You Can Count on Me, made a movie called Margaret. I don't want to go into a tangent, but like seriously, like put it on your list for like the next like week or two.
Nice.
Sure.
It's a really odd movie in that it was made right around this time, maybe a couple years later, and Anna Paquin is playing this character exactly, but the whole movie's about her, and it goes to really uncomfortable places, but it's incredible. And like, she should have won the Oscar. I mean, I think she did win she won when she was like, was it the piano? She's won an Oscar. But anyway, Margaret is an incredible movie, and it's really strange to see this movie after, having seen that in the last 10 years and being like, oh, she's playing like the exact same character. But
weird. But it's just from her perspective and like...
Yeah, she plays like a young high school girl in like the Upper West Side who's like, getting into some trouble. And but it's an incredible movie, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It has, I think, a really good reputation amongst like movie lovers. I think you guys would love it.
Nice. Yeah, it's on our list.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm there. I mean, the flip side of what I said earlier about it being a film about men's relationships is that the Anna Paquin and the Rosario Dawson character get shortchanged in their character developments. And, that is, I think, a consequence of Ed Norton's speculation. He's creating distance intentionally, and then it's, so Rosario Dawson's character is kept at arm's length, maybe because he doesn't want her to waste her life on him when he goes to jail, because he's speculating that perhaps she is the one that informed on him. And Anna Paquin's character is generally like the Lolita, kind of like a flatter character. I think, ultimately, it's a decision that works in the context of this film because it allows you to focus rather than being too broad. It might not work if you were trying to cover all angles. I mean, it's already 2 hours and 15 minutes.
I also though think in the limited amount that those two characters are shown and developed, I do think even just the fact, just to backtrack for 1 second, the fact that that kiss doesn't turn into more and that you see her reaction and you immediately know so much about her in that moment.
Yeah.
They could have just made it a whole sex scene and then she's basically just a girl, but she's developed into this whole human in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
And then you don't see her again.
Yeah.
But and I think the same thing happens with Rosario Dawson where the moments where she's kind of being treated poorly or treated well by some of the other people, you get to know her so well in that.
Yeah.
They're not just objectified or something.
Yeah.
Which a man's movie you would think maybe would do that, but it felt very respectful.
Yeah, I think so.
Even if they don't have as many minutes on camera or something.
I thought the whole film, despite its runtime, felt almost like a short story. The way in which things are handled, it feels like that everybody's trying to come to much smaller moments rather than some grand cinematic experience.
I had that thought where I felt like it almost was play-like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it was the club, the apartment. There weren't a lot of, there were flashbacks here and there. So we've talked about Hoffman. We've talked about Anna Paquin for a second. Edward Norton. I just mentioned, when I saw this movie, I thought he was I just thought he was the great. I just was this guy is going to be
James Deaney.
Yeah, I was just he's going to just make a movie a year and they're going to be great and he's always going to work with the best directors. And, I haven't, I don't know, he's been in movies, but I feel like he sort of has done less, or I haven't seen, a bunch of it. And I was struck by his energy. I hadn't seen him in a long time.
Yeah.
And when this movie started, I was struck by his energy and it took me a while to settle into what he was doing.
Right.
I was a little bit do you know how it's when you listen to an album that you loved in high school and you're like, this is my favorite band, and you hear it later and you're like, it kind of had that vibe to me.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, this is big, and he's clearly doing his thing, and he's clearly not trying to be too much of somebody else. I feel like he's being him, but there's something about, I think it's a little bit of again, that first hour of the movie, it opens with him finding this dog, and he immediately takes the dog in. And to me, it just feels like it's, again, the magic trick is too much showiness. Where I'm I get it. He's a drug dealer with a heart of gold. but I was really, and in a weird way, that made me feel like the movie felt kind of dated in a 2002 way, where it was this Hollywood movie about a difficult adult subject of, a guy getting ready to go to prison, but it still had this sort of it did all this sort of Hollywood sort of cute moments to try to make sure that you were in the pocket for this guy. And I didn't remember that about the movie, and I really didn't like it this time.
Yeah.
And in his performance in the first half of the movie, and Barry Peppers just felt to me a little bit the best way I can describe it. And maybe I was just in a really bad mood. Yeah. And again, I like this movie. And by the time I finished it, I was like, this movie's great. I was crying. It's great.
Yeah.
That's I guess, so the magic trick ultimately does work. But at the first half, I was it reminded me of an SNL sketch. Him and Barry Pepper and what they were doing. I don't know. Maybe I'm being way too mean.
Well, what were the
really
scenes? What was the first hour? Are you saying them separately, what they were doing?
Yeah. I just felt because even with Rosario Dawson, when he comes in and he's like, I can't talk right now, baby. I was just well, this is so crazy. This is they just felt too much.
Yeah, yeah.
And once they get to the club,
Yeah.
something changed. And again, this is where I did the second night. But once they get in the club, like I felt like I was just like all the stuff that Spike Lee is doing as a filmmaker there, like it just makes sense to me because they're in a club and people are, and you've been with them and you kind of know what the stakes are.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to think about that, just the fact that like Spike Lee is making this movie about, a predominantly white group of characters.
Yeah.
And like, and in the interview that comes up, I feel like very sort of like, not so subtly with Charile Rose, where they're like, people say this one, you're trying something different. And it's like, and I think it's like, it's great, but it's just like, it is a sort of thing where I think like, that's probably like.
That was asked on the interview and I was like, they wouldn't ask that question. Like I was frustrated for Spike Lee that he had to answer that question.
Yeah.
And he answered it with like a degree of grace. And then actually at the end of the interview, Edward Norton brought it back and like kind of defended Spike Lee.
Yeah,
I was wondering what energy was going on between Ed Norton and Spike Lee, because certainly they have a working background at that point. Like if he was like, this is Spike being vulnerable, I need to defend him or something. But it was kind of it was a coded question. Like you're working with white actors now, and people are saying you're like you grow in this role or something. Like that was essentially what. And I don't think I don't think Charile Rose meant anything by it necessarily, but it was clearly one of these things where like wasn't the greatest question, and Spike Lee was like, well, I don't think I'm doing anything new, but I also try and do new things in every film.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I'm sorry.
No, yeah. I guess I'm just really curious if you guys were on board with like what Norton was doing from the beginning, because that was like the number one thing I think. And then I promise I'll not talk about the first hour anymore.
That's okay.
But it's just like that. There was something so like, it's like when you see somebody and they're doing a lot. I don't know. I can't explain. It's
just like overacting or over.
I think it's not even so much that it's just like the fact that I guess the script feels the need to be like, and he also loves dogs.
Oh, I got it.
You know what I mean?
Like,
to the point where like it kind of like wants to. I don't know if it wants to have it both ways, but it's like he is a heroin dealer and he's ruined people's lives. But it's like I think it really quickly wants to get into like, but he's really. I mean, look at him. Like he's so good. He's Edward Norton.
Right.
And I just felt like it just felt really Hollywood. It felt really Hollywood, like not in a way that was like sort of, I don't know.
I think I have some. I'll let you go first of what you felt about it.
I mean, I guess I feel like I come at it from a different perspective because it's the first time I've seen it, and I'm actually not super familiar with Edward Norton. This is like a weird fun fact, but until maybe about 5 years ago, anytime anyone said Edward Norton, I pictured the husband of the, like, in The Honeymooners, there's that other couple that hangs out with Alice and the main guy.
You thought that was Edward Norton?
Art Carney. He thought Art Carney was Edward Norton.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Oh my God, what if Art Carney had been in this movie as the guy?
And everyone like talks about Edward Norton as this like really attractive, like.
You're like, really? All right. What are you into?
And I'm also like, why is everyone such a big fan of like the other husband from The Honeymooners? So anyway, I come from like a very fresh perspective. And I guess it just didn't bother me, but probably because I like have no concept of like really who this is, I think the biggest thing is I was just trying to figure out, like I knew the plot of the movie. Yeah. Because we were obviously doing this walk related to it.
Right.
So I was trying to like figure out where we were in time. Like, it started with the dog thing and then it went to him on the bench and some guy coming up to him and wanting to buy heroin and him saying no. And I was like, oh, is that going to be the guy that's going to rat him out? Like, I didn't know where we were in time yet. So I was I think I was just more trying to figure out the plot. I didn't really pick up on all the development that was happening. Yeah. I also just I loved that he got the dog, you know?
It was a good dog.
Yeah.
I think this is parallel to what you're saying. I'm not sure if it entirely addresses it, but something that I was struck by through the course of the film, and would definitely be evident in the first hour of the film, is I'm thinking about like myself in relation to time, in relation to the age of these characters, and in relation to actually the prison length the term 7 years. And like as we were watching the movie, you know, because now we can do this, you know, I pull up IMDb and I'm like, I want to know how their age is.
Right.
The old Philip Seymour Hoffman was the oldest at 35. And then Barry Pepper I think was 32 and Edward Norton was 31 maybe or something.
Wow.
And you know, I'm older than all three of those people.
Right.
But it's kind of like I always think of Friends too. Like the show Friends, everybody's always going to be older than me.
Right.
Doesn't matter how old I get, they're still going to be older than me. And similarly, these guys seem like older than me, and they're not. They're younger than me. And then like the context of what 7 years means, it was really an interesting length of time to choose for prison. Because it's 7 years is a long time, but 7 years isn't a long time. And you know, he'll still be, if he is in fact the age he is, he'll still be in his 30s when he gets out of prison. You know, and so I guess when you were talking about like listening to an album from high school, I felt some of that too in the energy that they were bringing and he was bringing to his roles, like Not Now Babe or whatever I'm going to say. Like it was definitely, it felt like an energy that was younger than I am, yet these characters are still older than me, which is kind of be like, you know, older in my head.
What
you know?
you're saying though totally makes sense to me. That, especially the moment you picked out where he's like, not now, I can't talk to you now, baby. I'm like, it's your last day on Earth.
I said to Jesse, it's very frustrating that like I can't imagine. I don't know. I don't know if I would. This would not be the night I would choose for the last night if I'm going to be with. But he, you know, does it work in the context of the film because he's all fucked up with trying to distance himself? You know.
Yeah. No, that's true. That bothered you a lot. I think that we're talking about like she wants to go take a bath, right? And he's like, no. I thought that was great because. Again, I was like so confused where he was like, no, I don't want to. And then they cut to a bath scene and I'm like, are we an hour forward in time? Is this, like, I thought for a while that we were an hour forward in time until the DEA agent arrives. And then I was like, oh wait, this is a flashback. This is the thing. Like, so I was interesting, like all those, I don't know, I guess I just was thinking about that little brooding moment. It was like it felt like a good trick to like, it tricked me.
Yeah.
I guess is all it is.
I think it worked in the context of the film. Like mechanically, I think it worked. But the behavior itself is not something that I could relate to, is what I was saying. Like that would not be how I would go about things necessarily.
Yeah.
And that struck me more as like a product of like age for me, even though it worked for the film. And so I think that there is a lot of stuff that it is like the man school of acting thing that's happening in the first hour, I think.
I mean, it's funny you brought up the DEA agents in that scene. Like that was another one where it was just like, oh my gosh. I was like, why is he doing it like this?
They were so annoying.
Oh, I thought those scenes were great.
I like those scenes. It's just like when he goes, shit. And you're like,
that's a meme. I don't know if you've ever seen it online. It's like it's a minor meme.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Isaiah Whitlock. He was great in both scenes.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting, like, I took it from the lens of Spike Lee, where it's like role reversal, like these two black men like interrogating this white, drug dealer, and then that tertiary white guy that was he was literally there for window dressing.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that at all, but that's a really good point. I was more like, wow, this is interestingly like super anti-cop. Like really progressive. That was what I thought, but like also done in like a really cartoony way where it's like they're just annoying characters that like can't just like do their job.
Yeah. I did see this comment on this on Letterboxd. Somebody had written about this movie, and I have to bring it up because it's super. It's an awkward, hard thing to talk about. But somebody wrote something along the lines of like, it's interesting how much this movie. A huge energy behind this movie is the idea of the fear of like prison rape.
Oh, I literally
Mike
was going to
been
talk
talking
about it. I was going to actually bring it up, and that's great. Go on.
To the point where, again, like, I almost feel like because of the behavior and some of the acting around it, it almost becomes a little bit SNL sketch-like. Because they do it so many times to the point where it's almost like, I get it. I know, and I'm not saying like I don't want to hear. It's just the way it's portrayed by some, like especially with like, like it's like there's like I don't like if you like take a drink every time somebody mentions getting raped in prison in this movie.
Right.
That
You'd
first
be
hour
very
would be
drunk.
really you'd be super trashed.
I'd feel
That's
like how I
true.
felt
That's
today
true.
walking a marathon.
Yes, and it's like I mean, I don't know. I think it's just the way that it's almost like I wish like what would have happened if whatever Hoffman was playing the Barry Pepper role or something. I feel like then I would probably. It's just like there's just this
Yeah.
sort of like sinking their teeth into it as an actor type thing that just feels cringy.
Yeah,
And like,
totally.
And not because of the subject matter, because of the way it's being like performed. It just feels very like like if you've ever seen like a high school play, and they're doing like Death of a Salesman, and you're like, this is ambitious.
Right.
But then it's like if you get somebody, and that those plays can be great, but it's like, you know what I mean? If you have somebody doing the breakdown scene like way too much, where everyone in the audience is just trying to be kind of polite a little bit. That's how I felt during some of the moments in this.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There are several things about that. I said to Jesse, I think we talk about how films age. I think that whole concept is gonna age worse than even like the student-teacher relationship as years go by. And I already feel like it's not appropriate insofar as like we're starting as a society to turn our consciousness towards the idea that like, hey, this is supposed to be rehabilitative. Prison's not supposed to be like punitive. And to talk about things this way, I think it was done in the film because there's not like you think about drama and things that motivate characters and motivate plot forward, and you need something that's like the big bad thing to like why should we care, And so the movie so confidently goes after this idea that prison is a terrible place where you're going to get raped and there are sexual predators in there and you better not be pretty because it just goes it's so confident in that perspective.
From multiple characters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
multiple, And that I mean, have I been to prison? No. I've heard of people's perspectives from coming out of prison. And among those perspectives is the idea that like, yeah, there are people that are gay and they're in relationships and that's their business. I haven't had any experience having to deal with that. I'm sure there are also people that have been raped in prison, but it didn't take any time to think about the kaleidoscope of possible outcomes that prison could provide.
Right.
It really just sunk its teeth into the fact that it's a terrible place, and that motivates Barry Pepper beating Edward Norton up at it is the engine for so many of the points of the movie. Particularly in a movie that is so dialogue heavy, it needs a boogeyman in order to motivate things, and I think ultimately. That will probably age more poorly. I hope it ages more poorly as we as a society like figure out how our rehabilitation system should work. And it shouldn't be like we are going to scare people into staying in line by saying that you follow the law or you're going to get raped. Like that's crazy.
Well, I hope I made this comparison that I thought was kind of nice. I hope that it becomes really like a terrible thing to hear about because I think at the moment, like our concept of what prison is so unknown. Like either maybe you've been there and then you tell a story, but then your story is just, it gets filtered in and people believe it or they don't. But if you've never been there, it's like the equivalent of dying and going to hell. So like, that's a different thing because you're not going to come back and tell people like how that was. But it's like, it's this completely unknown, like behind a curtain. You're going to go there and who knows what's going to happen. And like, that's really not how it should be. And so I really hope that, the way they portray prison in this movie does become something that's like cringy or worse for people in the future. Because I think right now still it's like they're showing character development with like all these people that are either like building up the story of how crazy prison is or they're just really, really scared. Just like people are like really, really scared to like die and potentially go to hell. And like that's a thing. The church uses hell the same way that our legal system uses prison to keep people in line. And like, I'd love for like, obviously hell, we're never going to know. We can't figure that one out. We can't like open that curtain and have people see what it's really like if it exists, whatever. But like prison, like we can, like we could know for real, like what people experience and like make it a better system. It doesn't have to be a hellish concept.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure in 2002, like statistically, like they could probably prove like that there's a lot of terrible sexual assault in prisons. And like, I'm sure there's a lot of other things to be horrified of in prisons still. And, you know, but to me, it's just that the fact that the movie feels the need to bring it up so many times to an almost comical level. And to also like, it literally feels like they're like, I don't know if having fun with it is the right word, but they literally use it as, like you said, Mike, a boogeyman in a way that it just feels like in bad taste. Yeah. Not even to like 20 years later, but just even then, like just as a storytelling tool. Like it just feels a little bit like too much. And I think, you know, it's probably annoying to go back and look at like a filmmaker's like other works and like masterpieces, but like Do the Right Thing, I think, is like the one that like everyone knows. And and it's like, I've you know, seen it a couple of times, and I got to see it at BAM a couple of years ago. And it's like that movie is so like, I don't like perfect is one word, but also like it has so much humanity in it. It has so much like even like the sound, like everyone you kind of like, it's a complicated movie and nothing is sort of like simple. And you know, I mean, it's I maybe I'm not choosing the right words by saying it's not simple, but it's like it has so much nuance and complexity in it with all the human characters, and I feel like it's just strange to see then Spike Lee make a movie in 2002 or 2003 where it's like, you better watch it, where they bring it. It just feels like a different director. Like, and sometimes it happens to me with filmmakers that I love, and I start following them, where it's like you kind of see them get the keys to the kingdom, and maybe they're just in a hurry, or maybe they have to like make the movie quick, and they don't have enough time to like really like get in there and figure out the script exactly how they want it. But it feels to me like maybe it's one of those instances with him where he's just sort of like, I gotta hurry here. I want to do this movie, and like Edward Norton's available right now, so they maybe didn't have a time. And then it wasn't until they were, you know, made the movie and we're like, man, we accidentally had them talk about this a lot. Maybe that was a little bit in bad taste.
I don't know. It seems like for me, it seems like this is what they wanted to do. Like it seems the movie expresses it so confidently. I think that it is the engine of the film. So like one way or another, like you're either on board that all of the characters actually believe this. Like Jesse made a good point when we were talking about it, where it's like, it doesn't really matter if that's what prison is or is not. Edward Norton certainly believes that that's what prison is. Right. So he is motivating, all of his decisions are motivated on that idea. So if you are able to go along with that, then you can go along with the movie.
So I know we're jumping around in this movie a lot, but then going toward the end, in the second half of this movie, I found the end incredibly moving.
Oh my God, I was sobbing.
Now, and it's because of that moment under the bridge. And like, I think it still works regardless of if it's about like, he needs to get, you know, like made ugly because of the sexual assault. It's like, I think that I can go with like this idea of like, it's pretty extreme. And
I think it's really about Barry Pepper being frustrated with his basically brother fucking up his life. And like them, like also, men getting out their emotions in the way that a man in 2002 can, you know?
And I think also like, the Edward Norton character is saying, you know, like, oh, you have to make me ugly. But I also wondered if like he's been brooding this whole time. He clearly like hates himself. He's going to prison. Some bad things might happen in prison, whatever, you know, that's what everyone's saying. But also like this is a thing he can control. He can get like the shit beat out of him right now by someone that he cares about. And like that could be this like weird catharsis for him of like, this is what I deserve and like this is my punishment. And I'm just gonna like, I need to like take it and like feel like I'm ready to like flip the switch and be the next step.
I like that.
And Spike Lee possibly utilizing the Fight Club energy as well. You know, like taking an actor's credits and bringing them to bear in future projects.
Jesse, I got goosebumps though hearing you describe it like that. I do think, I mean, like for all the things, all the trash I'm talking about this movie, like I was like very moved by that. And I was blown away by it. I was blown away by like how well it works. And even then it's still pretty like over the top, but it's like everything at that point was working for me. I think it's like, you know, I mean, when he starts it by hitting Philip Seymour Hoffman,
I
like the whole thing and
know.
the dog barking,
Yeah.
Oh
like
my God.
it's so. I mean, yeah. And it's funny, Mike, when I was telling you about my friend growing up, when we saw it, like that was the moment that I think really sunk him.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really, I don't know. It's like there's something very like primal about that scene. There's something very like childlike about it, I think. I mean, I like the thing that I was struck by this time is how once it's done, the way that Barry Pepper cries,
Yeah.
it's very much like the way that like a little boy would, like he's really, I don't know.
Totally.
It's really an incredible,
Yeah.
it's almost like all the stuff I complain about in this movie, it's like it's worth it to get to that ending. Like
Yeah.
that, to me,
Yeah.
like that, I was very blown away by it. And what happened to Barry Pepper? What happened?
Mike?
You as an actor?
Yeah.
Oh.
He had a run up until 2007 or 2008. I mean, he still acts, but
Yeah.
like that, his prime was like the
Because
early 2000s.
He
He's in The Green
Saving
Mile as
Private
well.
Ryan? Is he in
I
Saving
believe
Private
so.
Ryan?
Oh, is he?
I might be
think-
wrong.
I don't know. In his
I think
IMDb, you know, they have like notes, and it's like
Yeah.
known as the actor that cries in movies.
Oh no.
Like that's for, you
Oh.
know, and
Wow.
Chews gum. He
yeah.
seems like a gum chewer.
his
Totally.
he
And
grew up.
stares at women anytime they walk
Yeah,
by.
yeah.
You get that?
He grew up sailing with his family for like 3 years. Like
Oh,
that was
interesting.
his life.
Huh.
Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, I think he's a very strong actor. Maybe hopefully he'll make some sort of
Yeah.
career
Resurgence, yeah.
renaissance. And I mean, hopefully he already has a successful career. I haven't seen him a lot recently.
I mean, it's weird because I feel like I just spent like an hour complaining about like him in the beginning of this movie, but then I'm like, but the best thing about this movie is him at the end. I mean, but it's yeah. I mean,
He
think-
plays what was generally kind of a distasteful character in contemporary society, which is kind
Yeah.
of like he's like the red pill alpha male,
Right,
you know,
right.
like type character, the
sort of
99
Wall Street.
percentile.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I like that. I like those series of scenes between him and Philip Seymour Hoffman. There's like 3
Oh my God.
I guess in the first
One
hour,
of my
in the
favorite
middle.
ones, I don't know if I should think this is funny. I don't know. Maybe this isn't appropriate. But when Philip Seymour Hoffman tells the story about Terry, the biology teacher,
Oh yeah,
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
you have-
it's just the way that he
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
it. When he's
Yeah.
like, there's this guy,
Yeah.
Right.
Terry. I love that the name is Terry. And he's a biology teacher.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the Wall Street guy is just like
He like sees through it.
doesn't even play along like at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's so great about Philip Seymour Hoffman's role in this is like you watch and you're like, if this is the only movie you've ever seen with him, you're like, oh, this must be all he can do, right? You know, like he just so is that character. But you watch
Yeah.
any of the other movies and you know that he can go anywhere else on the
Totally.
spectrum. But like he's just so pathetic, really. I mean, even like he's in the teacher's lounge when he's at, you know, that's interaction towards the beginning of the film when it's him and Anna Paquin. He has all of the chips. Everything is in his, and he can't even have a conversation where he is wielding his authority in a way that's anyway appropriate. You know,
Yeah.
he's just pathetic from the get.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Pathetic, but like relatable. Like that's the thing that he does that I don't
Yeah, yeah.
understand. Like even when you know what I mean? Like I always feel like there's something that feels so, relatable.
Yeah.
Like in every movie I've ever seen, and I feel like I've seen most of his stuff in movies. So yeah.
Well, in this one, it's like I can't relate to being a teacher and being attracted to my student or being like having any of that particular issue.
Yeah.
But I can definitely relate to being in situations where I'm uncomfortable, and like I can relate to feeling kind of like torn between like, should I do this thing I want to do when I know it's bad? Like, and I think he just like pulls out every like inner human quality that like I don't even know how to put into words, or like don't even necessarily know that I'm feeling when I am feeling those things.
Yeah.
But or like can't even necessarily point to like a specific time
For
when
sure.
I felt those things, but I'm just like, oh wow, I'm like there with you, man. Like this, like this is a weird feeling, and like it's something we somehow can relate to.
I think he's good at like doing uncomfortable work and then like finding, you know, because it's like the thing I find relatable about him is his sort of like in this movie it's just like his sort of reluctance to even want to go out on the town with these guys in the first place, but this sense of responsibility and commitment to his friends. And then, like he takes the dog. I don't know. There's just a lot about the way he does everything that I just think is.
Yeah. And so they talk about in the Charile Rose interview to a degree, and it informed my viewing of it, the idea of, I think they also reference Do the Right Thing as doing this, perhaps I'm wrong, but the idea that you're not giving the audience full resolution, which might be something that you typically get in Hollywood films, like, tell me how to think about this. Do I feel good? Do I feel bad about this? And each character has, or the three men characters, and I guess Anna Paquin's character to some capacity, we're given a stopping point, and then we get our own interpretation of it. We'll get to the Edward Norton one last because I want to talk about the ending at some point. But we have Barry Pepper's end, right? Which it's unclear if it's that same night or not. It probably is.
He's sitting on a park bench.
He's sitting on the same bench that they all were, and he's looking out. And, you think to yourself, like, how is this night going to change him? Is it going to change him? Jesse and I talked about it. We didn't think his life was going to change. Like, the trajectory of his thing seems to be like he probably has these moments of, like, kind of existential uncertainty because he's smart at, like, some type of irregularity, but it doesn't seem like he has the wherewithal or isn't provided it in the film to escape. Like, he'll probably be further up the Wall Street food chain in 7 years when the prison term would be over. With Edward Norton's, you can get to it in a minute. I mean, the Anna Paquin character, she has kind of, like, punctured reality in a way where it's like even though she's like has a sense of her own sexuality, but Philip Seymour Hoffman seems like this, pole she can kind of, like, skip around, and like it's not gonna change, and then it does change, and it's like, whoa, I can change the institutions. Like, what am I gonna do with that energy?
Right.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is, committed sexual assault on a 17-year-old. I don't know if that's exactly the terminology that we would use there, but he committed, certainly in the eyes of society and in the eyes of the law, something that is not appropriate. And then he's in a new set of clothes. He's walking the dog. It might be the same day. It might be a new day. And then a woman runs by and goes, "Cool dog." And then he's like, "Cool dog."
Like, this is what I should have been doing this whole time.
Yeah,
Right,
and then
right.
Meeting older ladies with a cool dog.
Yeah,
Right.
but that is the closest I'd say in the film we get to the film's opinion, the director's opinion. Telling us what we should think about this character past.
That he might potentially change
And Rosario
directions.
Dawson, I think she's just like, her last scene's just at the door when the...
That's why I didn't even
giving him the
reference her.
ice,
She's
yeah.
I kind of just thought of it when you were talking about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking that, like,
Well,
We
her
don't-
last scene in reality is at the door giving him the ice.
Right.
Yeah. There is the second
But we
montage.
do have that,
Right.
yeah.
But we don't know exactly what's going to happen to her. And
Yeah, I mean, and they see, you see them interacting, and he's saying, like, don't wait around for me. I don't want you, and she's like, I want to. So that's like, it's unclear what's going to happen,
I mean,
but it's also kind of not that, like, interesting necessarily.
I don't know.
Because, like, probably she's going to visit him either for the next 7 years, and they're going to figure that out, or, like, a shorter time, and they're not going to figure that out, and she's going to move on. Like, that seems like,
For that, the Rosario Dawson thing, I'm a little, like, I don't even want to think a little bit too much into it, which is interesting because he pours the ice out.
yeah.
Right.
And for me, that's the only thing we have to go on, which would suggest to me that, like, they're done.
But it's kind of not up to him if she comes to visit him. She comes, it's like he might not come back to visit her, but he's not going to come back to visit her anyway. Like,
well, 7 years. Maybe
like,
if he's like non-communicative and whatever, then it just dies out as a natural consequence, I guess. Because I would like them. I do feel like I want them to succeed, which is funny because I mean another thing the film does with the relationship of the students is show that he picked her up on a playground when she was 18. Like, that is part of Philip Seymour. I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman calls it out explicitly, like, well, Charile and Monty, they were, you know, they in a few years she'll be 22 and I'll be whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Like,
although the age difference between Charile and Monty is like maybe 5 to 10 years in that range, and the age difference between Philip Seymour Hoffman and Anna Paquin is like 15 years and like at least, and she's still in high school, and you know, there's like so many things that are just
I certainly
different.
wouldn't argue with you on any of that, but the idea is that like
that is
the characters make the parallel, and we are. I mean, the meeting scene that they have is played in a very sweet way.
Yeah.
And it's confusing in a way because it's like, is this appropriate? I don't know.
There's one other thing I do want to say about that I thought was interesting is that the guy who's going to prison for the big drug thing is the guy that made the correct decision about waiting with the girl, whereas like the sort of like sweetest character that you like feel the worst, like most pathetic character would like never do anything wrong kind of guy is the one that did like the worst thing with the young girl, like predator behavior, you know, and I thought that was like an interesting like equalization, like leveling of the playing fields where it's like maybe like, okay, they're all just like, everyone's just so good and bad and like all of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so to get back to what I was saying about like...
Except for those Russian guys. Those guys were bad
Oh my God.
news. I'm sorry, I just remembered them.
We haven't even addressed that whole scene. That's like a crazy scene. I didn't know they were there in the club.
Again, though, like, I don't know, a little bit of an SNL vibe to me.
A little much.
Like,
it was a little hammy.
A little over the top.
Monty, about the time. I can't even do it. It's just like, it was like, I was like, is this a Spike Lee movie? Like, you know what I mean?
I was when
it was a little over
it was
the top,
framed really interestingly because there was the two guys there when he's giving his speech. There's the mob boss and then this let's just say secondhand man
who says clever things
or
whatever. Yeah.
But like I almost thought, I told Jesse, I thought that the secondhand guy was explicitly in the frame to make the primary guy look more Russian.
Right.
Because he was like so Russian looking. The guy. It was well, it like adds to the believability of the situation to just have that guy standing there.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the same. I mean, it is that macho energy. Like this is serious. Beat up the guy. Like, did he give the advice to beat up the guy?
No, they beat him up.
No.
Like,
Like when you go to prison, pick out the guy.
Oh, he did. He did.
He was
it was
like,
the Russian guy that was like, look for the weakest.
Yeah. I've been to prison in three different countries.
Yes, I go
tattooed
to prison
survive
every year just to make myself more tough.
Right.
Yeah, and that is like the bro energy that that is in the film. That I don't know. I mean, I also wonder if that part of the reason that energy is in the film is to justify having these other conversations too, where it's like it allows men to have feeling moments because we also like do this, like this is the John Wayne-y, stuff too.
Yeah.
And like also it's kind of cinematic and Hollywoody,
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, I guess that's what related like all the way back, and then we can jump forward again, but a flashback to like that idea of it feeling a little dated. Like it also makes it, you're like, oh, did Martin Scorsese come in and like help with this part? Like it feels very like mobster, like De Niro, Pesci vibes too, where it's like, I love those movies, but it's like, oh, come on. Like it's so over the top and like, this is what this is and this is what this is.
Yeah.
It's like, Scorsese, I think is a really interesting comparison. His work with Spike Lee's is there these like two really, incredible New York filmmakers, right? You have these who've made several, what I think a lot of people would say like are masterpieces, but the masterpieces tend to be earlier, right? At least depending on who you talk to. But I think that there's like, amongst like, cinephiles, you're not going to get a lot of argument about like Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, or like Do the Right Thing, or She's Gotta Have It, with Spike Lee, where it's like, but I feel like it's funny that the scene we're talking about feels like to me like something out of The Departed, which is a movie like I only saw once, but I just didn't. I was like, what? I was like, what are you doing? Like, you're the best at this. Like, why are you doing this version of it? Like, this feels like you have like 1 week to make like a TV movie, and everyone like loved, and it won like Best Picture. I was like, what happened? And I feel like this movie has a little bit of that energy to me at times, where it's like you're Spike Lee. You're so good at this, but it's like it has these scenes that just feel a little bit like. Phoned in isn't the right word because they work and they're good, but it's just like they could just work so much better. I think you could have that exact same scene with the Russian guys. It's just that like, you know, it just doesn't have a lot of his fingerprint on it. It just feels a little bit more generic-y, like a little bit more stuff. Like bringing that guy who plays the bad guy in the
like following
HBO
a basic
show.
blueprint or something, like which is good and it's going to work, but it's like, not sort of like all the creative touches that maybe you might want.
So can I jump forward because since you saw it for the first time, the ending, like the very ending, which is another I think one of the best parts of this movie. So Jesse, were you like? I want to know what was going through your mind watching it for the first time because I kind of when I was seeing it this time I remembered my sort of confusion and sort of like excitement over this part of the movie.
That's exactly what it was. I was like that whole time
Do you
I
want to
was
describe
like
the ending for?
Oh yeah, okay. So the ending is that Monty's going to prison, and Edward Norton, and his dad comes to pick him up, and he insists on driving him, and they get to that part of the city where you're up like in Harlem, and you could turn over the George Washington Bridge and go to New Jersey, or you could keep going straight. They were going to go on the Palisades, I think, and like go up to the prison. Must have been upstate somewhere. And his dad is like, you know what? Say the word. I'll turn left. And then it cuts to this montage where he has turned left and they are driving across the country. They're in all these small towns. It describes this whole scene where like he's going to start a new life for himself and talking about how people only get caught when they come back, not when they run away. So like this opportunity to like not go to prison. It would mean he'd have to say goodbye to his dad. Like, they'd never see each other again.
Great VO work by Brian Cox as well.
Oh, yeah, Brian Cox.
Yeah.
Every man, woman, and child should see the desert or something. He says something like that.
I know we'll meet again, not on this earth. But
oh my God,
I think it's
sorry.
kind of almost kind of under, like, he's not hamming it. It's just like everything works, you know?
Yeah. Well, so I think the first 30 seconds to minute, because how long is that montage? Like 10 minutes maybe?
No, it's 4.
4 minutes. Okay, so then the first 30 seconds to 45 seconds, I was like, oh, he's giving an idea, and they're probably not going to do this. And then I was like, oh, wait, they made this choice? Oh my God. And then I was like sobbing. It was a very wet face. Because I was like, oh my God, he's never going to see his dad again. And like those 2 men that we just like are his best friends, like he's never going to have friends like that again. Like they're not even friends anymore, but they've known each other since childhood and they still got together. Like he's never going to get to do this again.
Yeah.
And he's going to, and Charile wasn't there. And so I was like, oh my God. But then she shows up and I'm like, oh my God. Like, and then I'm nervous that like, did they follow her? So there were like so many. I was like, this is beautiful, but so sad.
Yeah.
And like, because also I think they show his face healing.
Yeah.
And I think when they start to show his face healing is when I was like, oh my God, they actually did this.
It's a good detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before that must have been it, because up until that point, I was like, oh, it's just imaginary.
Right.
So then I don't remember how that montage actually ends. I guess it's when Charile comes. Oh, and they're with the family. He has a family
really old.
now.
You see him like he's like 80 years old, and his children are like 25.
Right,
yeah.
Right. He has like 10 kids, and they're he's telling the story of like him getting in trouble and like not going to prison.
Yeah.
And then you cut back to him in the car.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God. Like that, I was just like, oh shit, so he didn't do all that. And then I don't know, I felt very conflicted because I realized then, I'm like, okay, well, we know where he's going, obviously. He had 3 choices and he didn't take 2 of them, and so he's taking the 3rd one. And that was like, it's a pretty intense ending.
Andy's asleep in the car,
Andy's
which I think kind of makes it seem like it could either be like, I do think you could read it both ways. I do think you could read it as like he said, yes, Dad, let's fucking get out of here, and he's sleeping on the way out, or you could beat it as like, oh, he's just dreaming.
Oh,
as to
interesting.
I mean, I think, it's, but I do think you could read it either way. I don't know.
Maybe he's dreaming. I mean, they definitely got on the Palisades. They didn't go over the GW. That's the detail that at the very end, after they show him sleeping, they do show them on a highway, and it's definitely a highway in New York. It's not a highway in New Jersey.
Yeah. Again, it was like the scene under the bridge. I was so blown away by it this time. I just was like, oh God. I thought I was going to be able to be like, this movie doesn't work. But it's just by the time they're doing all that stuff, it's just like really good.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It feels to me, like I said earlier about the idea that the movie feels like a short story to me. It feels like this type of film allows it, like it has a couple of like really big tricks in it. The fuck New York montage and this New York montage, or this montage, where you wouldn't probably put that in other films. It's like a little more experimental.
Right. It's very much like what Spike Lee, I think, is doing, what he does so well in both those moments. And I feel like both these moments are similar. Like the fuck you sequence and this sequence at the end almost feel like the sequence at the end can almost be read as a fuck you to the audience, where it's like, oh, you want your happy ending?
Right.
You want your happy ending? Come here. Like, I'll do the whole thing.
Totally.
They're going to be dressed in all white at the end with like 10 children around.
Right.
All of it.
Yeah, it's like so absurd.
I mean, it is interesting. The end sequence almost gets comical. But it starts really kind of subtle. Like, it starts with like the bruise is healing. So you're like, maybe this is happening?
Yeah.
And it really does. It's really strange for a movie that's so sad and morose and heavy, how I do feel like he kind of like hides in a little bit of like winkiness. Like when Charile gets off the bus and the bus pulls away, she does the thing where like her like knee is up, like it's this sort of like, I don't even know what you call that, but it's like something you would see from like the 50s.
Right.
And it's got this sort of like, and it's like, and I think like Edward Norton's wearing a cowboy hat, and he has like a mustache. Like it almost seems like they're farting around a little bit at times, being like, this will be funny, right?
Totally.
And like kind of writing that line of like, but I also think there's something because the movie is so heavy and sad, we want it to be real. So you're sort of like wrestling with like, I was really, that this whole section of the movie to me was just I was in love with.
Yeah.
Well, and back to the idea that this, the consequences of prison, the hell that is prison that the movie presents, is if you are buying into the movie, then this is like the heaven. I mean, like the last scene where they're all in white and it's like kind of like Vaseline lensed. It's like literally the alternative to everything you are about to experience.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's the interesting dichotomy of heaven and hell, regardless, is that it's like so much black and so much white that you kind of if you are going to spend an entire film creating this boogeyman, then you have the opportunity to create this ultimate catharsis experience too.
That's true.
The ultimate opposite. And I don't know. I mean, I've never really thought about whether or not he does it or not. I mean, I guess I just always think about they're just always still driving. I don't know. Like it's like it just never. It's just this situation of perpetual in the process of deciding.
Yeah.
I don't think he
It's
ever
so
reached
interesting.
prison.
Yeah, I'm like convinced that they went to prison because of the road that they happen to be driving. Like I know that road.
Right.
Who says that road doesn't also lead to a desert? I'm just kidding. No, you're probably
It just goes north.
Yeah.
Maybe
go to
like
Canada.
Nova Scotia or something. Yeah.
There is a great the Brian Cox voiceover there though at the end, like he does, even though it's like this sort of the last thing you see in the montage is very sort of comical, where it's like old age makeup, where Edward Norton and Rosario Dawson are like old. Even though it's like kind of a funny image in that moment, I think the voiceover in that part is like Brian Cox says something like, make sure to tell them like how this almost didn't happen or something, or how lucky they are to be there. And that is like, again, another goosebump moment of this movie of like this sort of universal truth of like we all, just even as human beings, to even exist at all, like because our parents got together, you know what I mean? Like there's something really profound about that statement under this sort of comical image, and then backing up into this last image of him driving in a car. There's a lot of like ping-ponging emotion going on that I think is it's crazy that it works. It's really weird. Like when we talk about it, you're like, this shouldn't work. Like this will be stupid.
It
right?
sounds cheesy. It sounds like it should be cheesy.
It sounds like
but
too
it was
much
like
stuff.
not at all.
Yeah.
Also, a minor mechanical film point, which we referenced at the very beginning of this episode. the idea of the characters from the Fuck New York sequence precede this immediately, which is great because it gets you as the film goer back into the idea that like, oh, we're going to do this type of thing again.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna revisit the montage idea.
Right.
And for like the idea is that all these people that Edward Norton's mirror character denigrated are now outside of his window and smiling at him, and you know, showing him some sort of grace, despite the fact that he did not show them any.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to remember this because I do feel like that did totally change the way I felt about that whole sequence, and in a lot of ways, the whole movie. I felt like that. It sounds so simple, but it's like, to me, it reminds me of the feeling of, you know, if you've ever had like a complicated relationship with a family member, where you like might be really angry at them or not want to be around them, and so you can have this intense, almost like hatred at times of somebody like that. But then maybe when it's time to leave, or if they pass away or they die, and then all of a sudden you're like, you look at them differently. It's almost like you're like, oh God, no, I don't want to leave yet. And to me, I felt like that's how I read that moment, is like, he was like, you know, fuck all these, list every, you know, minority and neighborhood, like list out everything in New York, right? Which on just watching that by itself, you're like, well, Jesus, you know?
Yeah.
But then it's like at the end, and it's all silent, but it's like he's got this bruised face. He's going to fucking prison. He's sitting in this car looking out the window miserably, and he's seeing all these people that make up this city that he's you know, gonna miss and maybe never get to come back to. You know, like I think there's something really. It's just one of those, I think, examples of something where it's like, yes, this is uncomfortable, and maybe it is bad. I don't know. Maybe that sequence is bad. Maybe you know, but it's like there's something about it in the long form of like a 2-hour movie where the ideas circle back and they're complicated, and there's something to me about it that really made it click into place, and not in a simple way, not in like anyone says anything. It's all visual, and it's just like. You know, I was thinking though, to kind of make fun of it, you know, I did notice they only do a couple different people. Like, can you imagine if like the Bensonhurst guys were like, ah! You know, like, if he kept in the Upper East Side lady, and the you know, but yeah, it's a weird movie. I'm really glad that we got to talk about it and that I got to revisit it, because I was like not sure in the first hour. I was like, oof. But then, you know, it's a strange thing, like to have such an intense, you know, flip.
Yeah. Well, it's uncommon to do multiple viewings of a film too, so it's interesting. I wonder if you would have retained those feelings through the entire movie if you didn't have the break,
if you hadn't stopped,
or if you developed those feelings in the interim. You know.
I really think once the movie moves to the club, it feels like it's a Spike Lee movie in a way that, like, and when I say Spike Lee movie, I don't mean like he's doing camera tricks and stuff. Although he is, it's more that like I feel like the humanity in it just feels more like earned or something. I just feel like, you know, I like once they get to the club.
Interesting, several things about the club was, one, it's in Dumbo.
Oh yeah.
Which we were saying, like, I guess that's just an error we weren't familiar with, like Dumbo Club. Right now it's all like, you know, she shops, you know.
Although in 2002 or 3, man, can you imagine? I'm sure Dumbo was like...
Yeah, totally. That's why it's just not a part of our experience.
Yeah, for sure.
2, for it was a $15 million budget, which is, for all the stars that are in there, pretty low. And I think they utilized that warehouse to go to, like, a half hour, 40 minutes is just in, like, this one warehouse, which is just a series of like small locations. I think there was a third thing, I forgot what it was, but I think that was a good location. I guess the third thing I was going to say is, like, I don't know if you were a Game of Thrones fan at all, if you watched any of it or not, but
I never saw it.
Yeah, for me, I saw the echoes of what Game of Thrones was when it was at its most successful, before it kind of, in the eyes of pop culture, collapsed under the weight of its own expectations. But a lot of what Game of Thrones was, aside from, like, I mean, it's also like nudity and excessive violence, but most of the episodes were two people talking and like doing it in a clever way and just like advancing the plot through like two people talking. And this was the prototype for that. And
And Benioff wrote for that show?
He was one of the showrunners.
Okay.
Him and David Weiss and David Benioff, they were the Game of Thrones masters.
Yeah, I totally didn't know that. When you said that earlier, I was like, wait, what? Because I know the novelist, George, what was the guy?
George R.R. Martin, right?
I was like, when George R.R. Martin wrote 25th Hour, I was like, wait, what?
No. He wrote.
That would be confusing.
He wrote 25th Hour, then he wrote some other books.
Yeah, Benioff, the briefest of backgrounds for it, he wrote the 25th Hour book for his grad school thesis.
Oh,
wow.
And then his agent was also Spike Lee's agent. And Tobey Maguire read the book and then said he wanted to get this produced. And then,
my wife, when we were watching the movie, Amory said, when the credits came up, she was like, Tobey Maguire. And I think I said something like, well, it could be a different Tobey Maguire. And she was like, how many Tobey Maguires are there in Hollywood? And
that was Spider-Man money.
Yeah.
That was,
Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man?
Well, he was back then.
He was in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
I thought he was a baseball player.
I love stuff like that. He sounds like a baseball player. He's probably been in a baseball movie.
Art Carney and Tony Gwynn.
Yes, sexy Art Carney, but I love that. I love that, Tobey Maguire would read this book and be like, I'll put some of my money behind this and get this movie made.
Yeah.
But for any fans of the Game of Thrones there, I would be interested to hear people's feedback on whether or not there's something there that, mirrors Game of Thrones. Because for me, it did. That's when I think of Game of Thrones working successfully, I think of Peter Dinklage, having clever dialogue with one of the other Kit Harington or something,
Well, are people threatened with prison stuff in the Game of Thrones? Because it seems like that would be a good, if you go to this Game of Thrones prison, there's some crazy dragon shit in there. That you don't even want to know what that guy.
There might be, and I forgot it. I mean,
That's really cool, though. I had no idea.
Yeah. I think we should wrap this one up, though. This is great.
This is so fun.
Thanks so much for coming on.
No, I love talking about this stuff, as you can probably tell.
Yeah.
This is really cool for me to get to sit down with you guys and talk about a movie.
Well, we had a couple hours to talk about it, and then you brought so much more insight into it.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. It was really fun to rewatch it. Like I said, I had this really fond memory of seeing it with my friends. So it's a movie that I've always wanted to revisit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If I hadn't watched it to do this with you guys, I have a feeling I would have gotten around to it at some point again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a really special way to get to dive back into it.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us. We hope you had as much fun listening to us talk to James as we had talking to James.
Yeah, and if you did, you can press that little like button. And if you are watching this and you've never watched something before, or you've watched a few and you haven't really committed yet and you're ready to commit, you can hit subscribe and commit. And if you have anything to say, you can type it in the comments. And I hope we see you again. We're almost at the end.
That's right, just 3 more weeks of walking. It's crazy. We're getting into June now.
Yeah. Didn't know it was going to happen, but here we are.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It's happening. So until next time, take care.
Bye-bye.